Hi, it's me, InfP, and I wanted to talk about different video essays that I've watched in the past month or two, and I thought I would spread this out in several videos because I have a lot to say, I guess. These are from video essayists that I follow, but that I've been watching a lot of video essays this year, and I have a playlist with like 600 plus video essays. When I'm not listening to like INFP or autistic YouTubers or like cult survivors or audiobooks or listening to music, I'm listening to a video essay. And these video essays are very long, so I'm going to try to compress it and also add my own thoughts on top of it, so we'll see how this goes. Anyway, first I wanted to talk about a video, I wanted to talk about evolutionary psychology and how it's not great. First I watched a video by Münecat about evolutionary psychology and how it's all bullshit. Evolutionary psychology is kind of like trying to transpose biological facts about humans and then trying to have a cause and consequence like relationship, like a causation thing. But you know, correlation is not causation, and sometimes we can fall into certain traps, like, and it can lead to prejudice and eugenics kind of ideas, and it can lead to some people thinking that they're better than others, or thinking that they act a certain way because it is instinct rather than their own, taking accountability for their own actions. And so I won't say more about Munecat's video, it is very long, but basically studies that have been in evolutionary psychology have been very small, the studies have not been replicable, and a lot of time just shows the scientist biases rather than like actual factual information that is useful, you know? It's the kind of thing of like, men are muscular because they have to fight wild beasts, when it's like, you know, the thing is much more complex than that. Evolution also does not work in a way that has like a purpose. Evolution kind of actually is just that every being has different mutations, and then the ones that have the most advantageous characteristics for the environment at that time are going to have a better time surviving than others. So survival of the fittest is not really like that. The evolutionary result is not always going to be, you know, the best being. A lot of people think of evolution as like that we are evolving into higher and higher beings, which isn't really what evolution is about. And also some people think that evolution has a goal, when really evolution has no goal. The thing that happens is just, it happens over time, and then suddenly you have a species that is adapted to an environment, and then something else happens in the environment, and then suddenly the animal that results is not adapted anymore. And that's just the cycle of time, you know? Rather than seeing it as, you know, that a certain being is more evolved than another being. So yeah, that's about Münecat. And then I wanted to talk about Sydney Zarlengo's evolutionary psychology video. first she made a video. She is an autistic and disabled actor and educator and content creator, and she makes a lot of shorter video essays about autism in media often, but she also talks about autism and other psychology stuff. I think that she also studied psychology. Anyway, she made a video like a few years ago about the solitary forager idea that autistic people were evolutionarily, it was an advantage to have autistic people in, prehistoric societies. But then she made a video now that revisits that, and basically she proves herself to be wrong. And she has watched the Münecat video about evolutionary psychology is bullshit, and she's realized that it's a bit dangerous to move on that path, because saying that autism is an advantageous trait, or that it is a trait with any kind of moral value, it is inherently dangerous, because it can lead to eugenics kind of ideas of like autistic people being different beings than other humans, or being more evolved or less evolved, and that can lead to a scary path, and we shouldn't be assigning value to other people or to ourselves depending on how useful we are to society. We need to get away from that. We have value because we exist as human beings, and we are living creatures that deserve love and care, rather than thinking that a person is more valuable because they have these certain skills, or these certain traits, personality traits, or these certain talents. Everybody has a value that is inherent to them. Sure, it is great if somebody can help other people through their skills and all that, and build a community around that, but certain people will be less useful in a capitalistic society, but that doesn't mean that their worth is less. Somebody who has a chronic illness might not be able to contribute as much to like the production cycle of products in society, but they still have other qualities that are inherently good, and so to point to that evolution created autistic people, and that's why we are valuable, is not really the flex that you think it is. Autistic people are valuable because they exist, not because evolution deemed them in some weird fatalistic way, deemed them worthy of existing. It's rather that autistic people exist. So I really enjoyed that video. I enjoy a lot of Cindy Zarlengo's videos. She's also made a video that was critical of MBTI and personality types, which I also recommend. Obviously, I find value in MBTI because I have a channel based on it, but I can see her points. We don't want MBTI to be really, about traits being fixed, and that basically that we are like a deterministic thing where it's like, this is how you are and there's no way to change. That's not a great way to use MBTI. It's also the fact that MBTI was originally made on not great grounds. The history of MBTI is not, is pretty non-inclusive, and also the way that it was supposed to be used is a little bit more like in companies. It's supposed to be used by the capitalist. It's not supposed to be just used for fun. It was made to, classify people. So, there is that side to MBTI, which I do not like, and I don't want MBTI to be used in that way. But unfortunately, that's the way that it is often used. So I recommend that video too. I'll see if I can find a link. I'll try to put all the links in the description. We'll see. And then we get to Ember Green. She is also an autistic and disabled content creator. She makes pretty long video essays, and often about autism, but also other things. A long time ago, she made a video about identity, which I would recommend, but I don't remember the name of it. But there was a later one that is about Aspie supremacy, which kind of ties into this, where she talks about how there's a community of autistic people online that believes in Aspie supremacy, in that people who have Asperger's are more developed beings than high support needs, low functioning autistic people. And it also translates to that people with Asperger's or high functioning autism see themselves as more evolved or highly developed people than neurotypical people as well. And they would call neurotypicals as boring, sheeple, NPCs, and like there is a certain point where it's not a joke anymore, like maybe they'll say it as a joke, like, oh, there's a bunch of NPCs and the neurodivergent people have these special powers. But there comes to a point where it's like you are actually just being mean to neurotypical people who haven't personally done you anything wrong. You can't just like put a blanket statement on all neurotypical people. I understand that when you've been oppressed your whole life and have a terrible life as a result of people not understanding you, then you might be drawn to this kind of thought process. I myself have been part of the TERF community. I'm not proud of it, but it was a few years ago, quite a few years ago actually, but I still was part of it, and the reason for that was because I got radicalized. We talk about incels being radicalized online, men's rights activists being radicalized online, Nazis being radicalized online. But that also works for people from minority groups. We can also be radicalized. I, as a woman, had been radicalized into TERF spaces, trans-exclusionary radical feminism, so basically a transphobic group. But same thing can happen to autistic people. Autistic people who have been treated badly, and are a minority, may band together and wants to hurt people who have hurt them, which are the neurotypicals. And so, but the thing is, it's, first of all, it's wrong because everybody has the same worth, regardless of what neurotype they are. And so evolutionary psychology as well, is not a thing. So you can't be more evolved than anybody else. And that's where this Aspie supremacy thing resembles Nazi and fascism. And so Ember Green does a really good video explaining that. And and she explains why Aspie supremacy is wrong. Then we get to another Sidley Zarlengo, which is kind of related, about are HSPs autistic? And here, once again, it's another group of people who describe themselves as HSP. Maybe it used to be more people saying that, but now it's less. Now people are recognizing autism more. But HSP was created by like one person, and they created a website, and then I think that they sold a book or something. But HSP is basically just autism light, you could say, because the criteria for HSP is not a diagnosis, which lends to less stigma because it's not a medical diagnosis. HSP has the sensory issues and has the quirkiness, I guess, that is related to autism, and not the social deficits. Thing is that autism is a medical diagnosis, so it will be talking about deficits quite a lot, and that's not very appealing to people, you know, and so people would rather identify as HSP than as autistic. Now, I identified as HSP a very short amount of time, back when I was 15 and I was discovering MBTI and I wanted to be unique and special, you know, I was that special snowflake girl. But that's because I was undiagnosed autistic, and so I was just like, I know I'm weird, I don't know how, and this describes me. But the thing is, the reason that HSP describes me was because I was autistic. And I've seen that happen quite a few times, of people thinking that they were HSP and then they ended up being autistic. HSP sounds very nice, you know, oh, you're just sensitive, you know, and autistic sounds bad, you know, in comparison. And the thing is, the HSP creator and the people who identify as HSP often went to separate themselves from autistic people. And often by saying that autistic people have more problems than HSPs who are only good and who have special abilities that normal people don't have, like a telepathic kind of empathy, sort of, you know, these, hyper empathy people. But autistic people, first of all, are stereotyped as having no empathy, which is definitely not true. There are lots of autistic people who have high empathy, like higher than usual, or people who have low empathy. Just like neurotypical people can have high or low empathy. Also, empathy does not equal goodness, which is something that I think a lot of people have a hard time understanding, but empathy in itself is a neutral trait. It's a neutral thing. It might be useful, but it can also be hurtful. And empathy in itself is not a marker of goodness. And I think that there's a lot to do with, I think, like just our Western culture or something, maybe it's the Christian religion or something like that. But a lot of people associate empathy with like that's the best trait, like it's an innate indicator of goodness, when it's more than that. It's different. It's just, then there are different kinds of empathy as well. There's like cognitive empathy, and then there's emotional empathy, and so autistic people cannot read social cues as well, so they might not respond in the way that that you're supposed to, and so I think that HSPs think that they're just misunderstood because they are very special HSPs, when maybe those HSPs might be autistic. I mean, they might not be, but they aren't willing to look into the fact that they might be autistic, because they think that the reason that things are not going well for them socially is because of their sensitivity, when really it's because they do have social deficits, according to the DSM, which isn't, obviously does not sound great. It does not sound great to have a deficit. So it sounds better to be highly sensitive, you know? And yeah, so I understand this whole thing, and I don't believe that HSP is really a thing. I think that there are people who have sensory processing disorder, which is that basically you have trouble with, you know, perceptions in the world. You are pretty sensitive to those. However, I think that lots more people are actually autistic, rather than just having problems with sensory experiences. So that's about Zarlengo. Let's see if we have the time for maybe one more. We have, on the topic of empathy, we have Draper, who made a video about would you watch a public execution? Which she's a historian and I think like a tour guide or something. And she makes a lot of shorts videos that I like to watch about historical facts. But this one is a longer video, which is very artistic at the beginning, where she reenacts public execution, but like in an artistic way. And so she goes through like why would people go and watch public executions? And it's not because people had no empathy in those days, or because people were vulgar and violent. There is a whole process and ritual around these things, like the fact that people believed a lot in the church, and that an execution that was properly done was like absolving the sinner of their sins, and therefore that this was actually a religious kind of purification ritual in a way, rather than just like killing somebody. Also, sometimes going to an execution was the only way that you could get news, because maybe you couldn't read and maybe there weren't any newspapers, and you would only hear from word of mouth, and maybe you went to see for yourself so that you don't like just believe whatever rumors are spreading through your little town. And then there's also the fact that it's good to see the execution in public rather than the executions being hidden by the government, the king and his organization. So when you see it through that light, you start to realize like, it wasn't that crazy that people would go to these public executions. And also, people were bored. There wasn't a lot of entertainment to come by in the Middle Ages, so yeah. And then people started to revolt against these things, and then the French invented the guillotine so that everybody would be killed in the same way. Whether you were noble or you were a peasant, everybody would have their head chopped off in the same way, rather than the noble people being having the sword, and maybe somebody else would having an axe or being hanged is different, So there is a whole historical aspect to that. So please go watch that video by Draper. I will put all of them in the description. I think that we will leave it here for now. Next to come will be another Ember Green video about Harry Potter being ableist, And then we'll have CJ the X had made a video that has now since been taken down, which I will talk about. I've written notes called the 6 Shapes of God. And then we've got Elliot Sang has come out with a few videos, Alice Capel as well. So yeah, tell me if you want to see more in the series. And yeah, have a great day. Bye.